Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Find a Moment podcast, where we navigate the space between ideals and everyday life. We are your hosts, Gretchen Roberts and Jennifer Ford, and we look forward to finding a moment with you today. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Find a Moment. Today, we are going to dive into part 2 of our series on identity. Last episode, we discussed being a student of ourselves and understanding who we are so that we can love others well. And today, we're going to discuss understanding who our children are so we can love them well. And we will discuss toddlers to teens with you all today. And in thinking about being a student of our children, Jennifer, what does that mean to you? And why do we think that's important?
Being a student of our children involves seeing them as God made them. I would say that's probably the most important part, and seeing them that they are unique and that God has made them to have purpose and strengths and aptitudes, observing and attending how they express love and what are their preferences, what are their dislikes, what are their giftings. And I know on our last episode, we discussed some of the tools that we have access to for understanding ourselves. And those same tools can also be useful in helping us understand our children, things like the Myers-Briggs and the Enneagram also. Love language is probably the one that is the easiest for us, that was most helpful for us when our girls were younger to really figure out what that was. There's only 5 options, which helps. But the love language is you really observe your children, and then you find the things that speak to them and the way that they give love. That's the way that you can offer love to them too. I mean, of course, not just that way, but those are things that have helped us as a family to understand each other. Gretchen, what are some of the assumptions we might want to share before we get into our discussion, and also maybe just some foundational things to keep in mind through our conversation?
Yes, I think when we talk about ideals in everyday life, I think our ideal in this kind of our foundational ideal is that God made our children and He
Yes.
made them unique. And so if He created them, then we can go to Him and ask Him for wisdom and understanding when
Mm.
it comes to understanding our children. So we can pray and say, God, who are these children that you've given me? And you made them, and give me eyes to see their uniqueness. Give me, a vision to see their personality and the things that you have given them as strengths, God. You can pray and have this discussion with God of help me to see opportunities to
Mm.
love them well
Mhm.
and to see who they are. So kind of posturing ourselves from that position of our ideal of God, you made them and you will help me in this journey.
Yes.
And if He made them and He gave them to you to care for, then you are more than capable of being a great mother and father. Whatever your role is, He gave them to you, and you are capable in that role. And I also think one of the foundations is having a family culture, to discuss with your spouse, what are the things that we as a family want to be the grounding things for our family.
Yeah.
Are we a family who loves to cook together and we like to try different recipes, and we just have flavors, tastes for all these things? And maybe we're a family who enjoys nature and we love to go on adventures and camping and hiking, and um, giving your children this family culture is a great way to kind of begin the process of identity with them so that they have a family culture to identify with. And I think it really gives them also that sense of belonging. And I think every child wants to be loved and to
Mm.
feel like they belong and that they have a place. And so establishing that family culture and saying, we are the Ford family and this is what we do, and we are the Roberts family and this is what we do, and giving them that family culture is a way to have that first place of belonging for them to where they feel welcome.
Mm.
And I think another kind of assumption within that family culture, though, or a foundational thing to consider is that even in that family culture, we still need to allow the freedom and the space for our children to be unique. That just because you enjoy basketball
Mm.
does not mean your son will or your daughter will enjoy basketball.
Mm.
And so, having your family culture, but having the space to allow for their unique interests and to
Mm.
encourage and nurture those and to see those unique interests, that there is space for those to develop, I think are some kind of foundational points to kind of start from.
Oh, those are great. I love that. So when you were sharing about family culture, we still want them to find freedom to be who they are. So what does that look like in the younger years with our kids?
Yes, I think in the younger years, one of the first things to think about, at least for me, what first realization that I came to is I can't expect my toddler to have adult maturity.
Mm.
They are children. They are just learning and exploring and figuring out this world for themselves. And so I cannot come in with the expectation for them to have adult maturity. But in that, I still need to treat them as a unique human. So, in treating them as a unique person created by God, we can look for ways, even in the toddler years, to see how God has made them
Mm.
and to see the things that they enjoy, the things they don't enjoy. How do they respond when you are in a big, noisy trampoline park?
Mm.
Or how do they respond to a lot of activity? Do they love that and thrive on that, or do they really prefer more one-on-one time, maybe reading a book together at the library? So when you are going about your day-to-day life with your children, just really being observant of them, even as toddlers, and what they enjoy and kind of what their temperament is, and not treating everything necessarily as a character issue. If you are in a loud and noisy and chaotic place and your toddler is having a reaction to that
Mhm.
that you may wish they weren't, it may not be a character issue. It just may be that it is really overstimulating for them. And so having that awareness, it just takes a lot of time and attention and patience for yourself as their mom to try and figure them out and to not expect them, like I said, to go straight to this adult level of maturity. I think one of the ways that you can kind of practically do this is as you look for those things, you've prayed, you've asked God to show you who your children are, and as you see different characteristics about them to develop, you can speak forward into them about those characteristics, especially if they, are kind of these meaningful, defining kind of things. For example, there was one time when my children were all pretty young, and I really felt like I needed to speak into them to give them be, be, because we had a lot of children, and so they can feel like they maybe are different from their siblings, right? So they all have these different personalities and they feel different from their siblings. So I really felt like I needed to speak into each of them and to tell them, to share with them what I saw in them, character qualities. So we did what we called tray time, where I had one-on-one time in my room, at home. So very simple, just with some chocolates and some mom time. And I had written on a card for each child, these different characteristics that I saw in them. And so one of my children, we sat there and I was sharing with him what these qualities were that I saw in him. And he sat there and he popped the Hershey kisses in his mouth and it's like, okay, mom, thanks. And so I gave him the card. And so he had that card and he folded it up and put it in his pocket. So later in the day, I was in the laundry room and I was folding laundry and I heard his voice. And so I looked around the corner to see what he would to try and hear what he was saying, and he was holding that card, and he said, "I am determined. I am thoughtful." And on the card, I had just written the words determined and thoughtful. But he was claiming that for
Mm-hmm.
himself and saying, I am thoughtful.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was owning those characteristics that I saw in him. And of course, being the emotional mom that I am, I just wept in the laundry room because it was just so moving for me to see how powerful the words that we speak to them,
Mm-hmm.
how powerful that is, and how they internalize and own the words that we are sharing with them and speaking to them. I think another way, especially in the younger years, toddler, preschool, even early school age years, we spent a lot of time reading aloud and having characters and stories for children to relate to. Maybe it is a loud and boisterous character that your child relates to, or maybe it is a more shy, introverted character that you're reading about. And so having those stories so that your children can feel like, oh, I'm unique, but I'm not alone. I'm unique, but I still belong. And not necessarily to moralize the stories that you're reading at all, but just to have that be another starting ground for conversation with them and for you as a parent to be able to observe and listen to kind of what characters and even what stories they gravitate towards can really help you understand who your children are and kind of how God has made them and how they're wired and what their preferences are in ways that you can then take that and better understand how to love them and to meet their needs. Again, I did not do this perfectly. And it is definitely a work in progress. So, Jennifer, what are your thoughts on toddlers?
That feels like a season that was so long ago, and I miss it so much because it seems a lot easier at times than teens. But I will say some of what I'm going to share is really based on lessons that I maybe learned the hard way, or lessons that I feel like I learned a little bit too late, things I internalized a little too late. But I will say one of the things that was hard for me when our girls were young is they were both very verbal. And I would get confused about how old they were when we would be talking because, like you're saying, they're not little adults. And if you have little people in your home who can communicate clearly and complete sentences, but they're only just a few feet tall, it can be confusing. You can kind of
Yes.
get tricked into thinking that they have maturity and skills and a capacity that really is not appropriate for that age. And so it really, as a young mom, it confused me in terms of what were appropriate expectations that I should have of my kids. I think now, if I were raising toddlers, I would model positive self-talk more, even letting them
Mm,
hear even the words that I use to talk about myself, or if I'm describing if I'm frustrated with a task, or if I don't like the way that my body looks in my clothing, our kids are listening to that. And I really underestimated the importance of positive self-talk. I also think I would have been more intentional in equipping them with language to help them express positive identity and to help to do affirmations with them. I see videos online of moms or dads holding their little toddlers up in the bathroom mirror and they're saying, say, I am beautiful. And the child repeats, I am
mm,
beautiful. I am strong. I am strong. I am smart. Things like that. And I wish I had known the value of that, because that's really developing this internal voice that our children have when they
mm.
think about themselves. When they hear you talk to them and use those words, they are starting to internalize that as well. Um, I will say too, for myself, I wish I had been more sturdier. And this applies with teens also, but like what Gretchen, what you were saying about viewing certain behaviors, it's just a reminder that they need us for formation and for training, and that they have skills that they just haven't developed yet. Their brains are still developing well into their mid-20s. And so being sturdy enough as a parent to encounter, to observe, to interact, to discipline when it's necessary, but to not allow myself to take things personally. That was really hard. And there are definitely times, we'll talk about teens in a minute, but there are definitely times where that's still hard. But I feel like the big picture is that you are caring, and this is a vision that you have to receive from the Lord, and intentionally remind yourself of it on a daily basis. You are caring for a unique person who is made in the image of God, and that the Lord has ordained his good plans and his purposes for this person, for your little people, and that you have been given the gift of stewarding and caring for them. Every hair on their head is numbered, and they are fearfully and wonderfully made. The scriptures tell us that. And I just wish that I had understood the power of that, of speaking that over them. I wish I'd understood the power of it when they were younger. Um, you know, transitioning into thinking about raising teens now, I feel like one of the ways that I am a student of my teens is by just being around them, by just making myself available. Available is actually my word for the year. And initially, I thought it would just be something that was more kind of this vertical thing between me and the Lord. And really, the Lord has been showing me how valuable my availability is to my family, to our kids. So, Gretchen, you are a great example of somebody who has modified your schedule to be available for your children. And I have felt very convicted in some of our conversations about just how willing you are to stay up really late when they need you. And instead of me just saying, I'm tired, I'm going to bed, I said, what would Gretchen do? She's probably still up. So learning how to have those moments where I can sleep in the morning, or I can catch up later. This I'll never have an opportunity to maybe hear from my teen what they may want to share with me tonight. And knowing that look in their eyes when there's maybe something that they need to share, but they're not coming to you. Sometimes if I just go in their room and I can look at them and say, okay, I'm not leaving until you tell me. And I'm so glad that I make the time to do that, because it would be easy and they would have let me just walk on down the hall and say good night, and I go on to bed, and then they go to bed with themselves with all of these things still swirling around in their minds. So just modifying my schedule to be available. And there's, for some families, that's a lot easier than others, but I am confident, whether it's time in the car, or if I have an errand to run and I invite them to come with me, or whether it's late at night, there's definitely time that we can make ourselves available. I will say that I have learned to be more flexible with what type of foods I allow for our teens, especially. That's something that Sally Clarkson said recently at an event where she was speaking. She said, when they're teens, just get them whatever they want to eat. And I will say that my values around food are not shared by anybody else in our house. And so that's an area where I've had to really relax. But just asking when I'm making my grocery order, what would you like for me to add? And just saying yes to pretty much anything. I have had to learn how to do that, but that means so much to them. Um, these are, of course, they're just parts of teen parenting, but it's also communicating value to them, which feeds their identity. A phrase that I hear Dr. Becky Kennedy say that is important to repeat to your kid is to say, like, if they're struggling with something, or if they've not made a wise choice, to say, you're a good kid and you're just having a hard time. But that has become part of how I speak to our girls, and it's a reminder for me too. These are good kids. This isn't this one difficult issue or this one poor choice. This isn't defining anybody's value or identity or worth. This is just somebody that's having a hard time. I think reminding them of biblical truth of what the Lord says about them, um, and just continually revisiting that with them and calling out the good things that we see. Being sturdy for your teens, it can be so difficult, because I feel the temptation to take things personally.
Yes.
because they challenge things in a way that it can feel so much more vulnerable when your teens are honest with you about where they feel like you're having a shortcoming, because they maybe they do see some of your weaknesses or your flaws. And I've had to remind myself, like, be impervious to that, don't take it personally. And sometimes it's okay to tell your kid, like, hey, I'd kind of like for you to not snap at me, I'm just trying to help, but also to not take it personally. I think you can do both of those. And when you are being available to your kids for those late night conversations, when they're just talking and they're processing, they're also they're sharing things with us, but they're also learning about themselves. So it's kind of this two-part process where we
Mhm.
think they're just telling everything that they already know to us. But I know that, Gretchen, I know that when you and I share things with each other, we're also kind of working it out for ourselves
Yes,
too,
definitely.
and our teens are doing that. But building that trust and that intimacy, that is going to, by spending that time with them, I think that's going to pave the way for you to be able to speak truth over them when they need to hear truth, and maybe when they would otherwise be a little resistant to it. But building trust by being available and by assigning value to them, to their preferences, whether it's food or how late they stay up, um, or friend choices. Of course, there's some parental boundaries that have to apply with those things, but um, building a strong relationship gives you more of an opportunity to speak truth over their identity.
Mm.
Um, I have one teen who would live at the coffee shop if I let her. She she absolutely loves the coffee shop down from our house, and so whenever I have not had much time to connect with her, I'll say, "Hey, why don't we go to Casablanca?" And we'll go, and she'll get her drink and I'll get my drink, and we'll just sit there and chat. And that
Love it.
fills her up. It fills me up too. And then I would say one of the things most recently, like earlier this year, it was actually last month, for Mother's Day, I received a gift from our older daughter, and she had been collecting little notes that I had written to her over the past year, maybe. And she collected them and bought a big picture frame and attached them, like mounted them inside the frame and framed it. And she gave it to me.
Mm.
And they were notes that would say things like, "You're a beautiful violinist," or "Your hair looks so beautiful today," or "I'm so glad that you're in our family." Just little tiny things where I
Mm.
just found a quick little moment to write a note of encouragement on a lunch napkin, on a Post-it note. Um, she had been collecting and saving those, and she put them all together and gave it to me. And her message was, "I love the way that you love me."
Oh, it's so wonderful.
And every time I walk by and see it, I am reminded of how little tiny things can be big deposits in our children, and to never underestimate the power of just find a moment to just write a quick little note, and just how much that
Mhm.
was. Stick it on their mirror, stick it on their bathroom mirror, stick it on their vanity or on their backpack, whatever. But just how meaningful that was. I had no idea that those notes were so valuable to
Mm.
her, but that she would take the time to create that spoke very deeply to my heart. And I'm very grateful that I found a way that was meaningful for her. She felt loved by the way that I was loving her. So, Gretchen, what does it look like for you to be a student of your children as they've moved into their teen years? And how, like, what are some of the ways that you've seen that bear fruit in your
Mhm.
family and in your relationships with them?
Mm. I think one of the biggest things, and you touched on it too, is listening. I think in the younger years and the tween years, we do a lot of talking and we do a lot of instructing and teaching, and it's a lot of talking. And so it was a hard transition for me initially to have these teens who I really realized I need to just listen
Mm.
and give them the space to talk when they are ready to talk. And I will tell you, if you are a night owl, the teen years are your time to shine.
So true.
I am a night owl, so I love staying up and waiting for the moments when teens are ready to talk. I love all the times that we have had over the years of them sharing ideas and debating things and wrestling with things um, and to really be able to understand who they are because they are developing that independence and they're becoming a young adult. And so you don't get as many glimpses, I feel like, in the teen years as you have, when they're toddlers and little and you're just with them all the time.
Mm.
The time that you have with them when they're teens seems to become less and less. And so um, just to have that time to listen. I think listening is probably my number one thing that I have learned and that I really enjoy doing with them. Also, being active together, I've found that over the years has been a great way to connect, whether it's a sport they enjoy or uh, if they like to play pickleball or baseball or basketball or tennis, whatever they like to enjoy, even if you don't enjoy it or you're not good at it, you can laugh at yourself and go and enjoy that time with them and making the time to enjoy the things that they enjoy. Um, Really, I think opens the door to get to understand who they are and know who they are. And one of the things I did with a couple of my older ones was we trained for a half marathon together. And so over the course of several months, we did our weekly long runs together. And it wasn't always something they enjoyed. But they committed to it. And it was something that we kind of had this goal to work on together and to work towards. And we would celebrate with that coffee at the end of every run and enjoy that together. And it just gave us another time to connect and to spend time together and to listen and to try to understand who they are and what they need. And it was a really exciting, fun thing. And, as kind of painful as it was on some of those longer runs, it was so great to cross that finish line and to just accomplish something together with them. So being active with them, I think, is a great way to connect. And as they get closer to launch and kind of into that, closer to, are they going to college? Are they going to um, take a gap year? Are they going to go into working in a trade or, whatever their plans are for kind of that launching into adulthood? I think being mindful of that and knowing that a lot of their peers and our culture, that is a huge time of comparison and where there is a tendency for identity to be found in grades, in test scores, in acceptances, in scholarships, in accolades, all those things that kind of these objective measures that they use to compare each other and to compare themselves with their peers. And so to be mindful of that in the teen years so that you can speak into that and to help them navigate that their identity is not in what college they get into or they don't get into. And their identity is absolutely not in their ACT score, their SAT score, their GPA, or any of those things. And that is not where their value and identity comes from. And so I will say it is easy as a parent when you are in the midst of all these applications and essays and helping them navigate this world. And it is easy to fall into that trap of the importance of those things. And so just to be mindful and to remind yourself again and again that your identity also is not found in where
Mm.
your child goes to school or
Mm.
what schools they get into or what their plans are after high school, or that's not your identity as their parent. It is not their identity as a teen and a young adult. So just being mindful of that. And I will say that also in thinking about toddlers to teens, that there are some seasons where it may feel to you like they are rejecting your love
Mm.
and you can feel rejected. And I think, Jennifer, you touched on it, and I have felt it so much too, is that need to not take things personally.
Mm.
And, I think I shared in the Understanding Who You Are episode, I'm very emotional. And so it is very easy for me to take things personally. And you really, as the parent, as the adult, like Jennifer said, being sturdy and understanding who you are so you do not have to take those things personally, and that your children, the goal is to launch them into adulthood, for them to become an adult who cares and has their own unique personality and likes and desires and future ahead of them, that you are launching them into that. And so there may be times when you feel like that love is rejected. And so I would just encourage you in those times to rethink things, to rethink, okay, how can I show them love, or how can I connect or understand them? Because just as you are maturing as an adult and as a parent, they are growing and changing as a teen and a young adult, and they are becoming someone different than they were a year ago or 2 years ago. And so giving them the space for that, where you're going to have to rethink and kind of consider who they are and what they enjoy, and you're kind of always trying to understand who they are so that you can love them well. So I would just encourage you in those difficult seasons to not take it personally if you feel rejected, and to not give up, and to not feel like it is ever too late to try to understand them, to meet them where they are, to really show that you have no agenda but to understand them and to love them, and to give them that freedom to become their own person with their own beliefs and opinions and preferences, because that's really what you have worked so hard for all those years, is to launch them into adulthood.
Mm.
So, Jennifer, what would you share? What encouragement would you share with someone who, hearing all of this, and feels like this whole way of approaching their children and understanding who they are, this whole approach feels totally new, feels foreign to them, feels unnatural? What encouragement would you share with them?
I think I would start out by saying that the image of an hourglass can sometimes make us feel like we're running out of time, maybe, especially if you have teens. It might make you feel like, what's the point? I've already blown it. I've only got a couple years left. But I would just say that if there's sand moving through that hourglass, there is still time. If there's breath in the lungs, there is still time. Who your kids were when they were younger is not who they are now, but you will always be their parents, and they will always be hungry for your blessing, whether they say it, whether they show it. Children are hardwired to long for the blessing and the approval of their parents. I would say to speak life to them. I would say to listen. Don't overcomplicate it. Just take the time to try and understand them. That will feel like love to them. That will feel like you are assigning value to them. From a practical standpoint, you can find a moment and just connect with them one-on-one, whether it's a coffee date, or whether it's a trip to the gym or a walk around the block. Maybe it's just lingering for a few extra minutes at bedtime. Maybe it's actually spending time with them at bedtime as they end the day. Sometimes those final hours of the day are the hardest, especially for teens who have so much going on in their minds, and they don't know how much to share. They don't know if we're available. They don't know if we want to hear from them. So just sitting on the side of the bed at the close of their day and just making yourself available. A fun thing that you could do with your family is to also create sort of a family name. For our family, we are Team Ford. So whenever we sign birthday cards or if we on our family group text, it's called Team Ford, and that's been kind of a fun way that we've sort of named and identified ourselves. I would just say it's important to remember that your family is this unique thing that God has designed. It's this beautiful pairing. It's mysterious, but it's beautiful. It's these individual people that God has designed to put together at this unique time throughout all the ages. It's now for your family. And you've got this opportunity to create a family culture that can be full of beauty. And no matter what that puzzle looks like, there might be some hard personalities, there might be some difficult dynamics, maybe there are health or medical challenges that complicate things, but never before and never again will there be a family that is like yours. Your family is marked by the fingerprints of God, and we do believe that there are no perfect parents. I know Gretchen and I both feel that very deeply. There are no perfect parents, but also, according to God's good purposes and plans, you are the perfect parents for your kids. So I would just say to be encouraged, to find a moment with them, and just to pray and ask for what the Lord wants you to do next.
That is such a beautiful encouragement, Jennifer. We just want to thank you all for joining us today. And we hope that you will also check out our show notes page. We will link that on all of our social media. And on the show notes page, we also have resources. We have books and personality tests and a lot of information for you to take your next steps into understanding identity and who you are and who your children are so we can love those in our lives well. We also have printable cards on the resource page. Jennifer and I both shared stories about the importance and the impact that words have had on our children. And so we wanted to create a little something beautiful for you to print out and be able to share those affirming, encouraging words with your own children. So we thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to next week when we will be introducing you to a new friend. So we will have a conversation with her as we finish our series on identity. Until next time, we hope you find a moment.